Before we begin, I'd like to tell you why I think process theology matters. I've had for several years now several seminary friends in general, but seminary friends particularly, who have said, I really don't think, for example, prayer matters. If God knows what God's going to do, why should we try to change that? And I can tell you that after taking this course on process theology, I believe more than ever something that I suspected, but now can articulate better about why what we do is so incredibly important. Sort of things that people assume about God, that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, maybe grand creator of the world, but not necessarily so influenced in it other than in the person of Jesus. The classical God that is described here is not a reflection of the intimately involved, changing God that we have in the Bible. Think about the Old Testament when Moses is saying, God, hear the cries of your people, and God says, no, they're your people. And Moses says, no, God, they're your people. And God says, okay, I'll help you. So that's an example of the changing God that we have. And indeed, many of our assumptions about Christianity, about God, are from this ideology rather than what we have, the classical ideology, rather than what we have in the biblical accounts. Process theology claims a more biblical God. You can agree or disagree with that as you like. But it claims a God who is dynamic, responsive, exercising persuasive, but not coercive, power. For process theologians, God is within creation, not outside of it. God is the creative source of all possibility. With God, as Janine Sledham said, with God there is always a new beginning. How can this be? Well, process theology, like we talked about last time a little bit, was born out of Alfred North Whitehead's philosophy. Alfred North Whitehead was the son of an Anglican priest, originally a mathematician, and he later became an educator in London and finally a lecturer at Harvard University. He developed his philosophy, it's called the philosophy of organism, which is what we think of as process. In the 1920s, in the era of Einstein, when quantum physics was replacing Newtonian mechanistic physics. What does that mean? It means that Newtonian physics was looking at the world as a finely tuned machine, but Whitehead preferred to look at it as more organic and interrelated, a whole. He believed that there's no such thing as a thing in itself. We are all connected. We are all we influence one another. Another way we might say that is we don't live in a vacuum. For example, we don't appreciate a planted flower just because it's a flower in itself. We appreciate the grass or flora and fauna around it. We appreciate the way the sun shines on it. We appreciate whether it is planted on a mountain or a plain. We appreciate it because of what's around it as well. For Whitehead, nothing was set in stone. He believed that there would always be new discoveries and new learning, and that ways of seeing the world cannot remain static. We can't have the way we see the world be an unchanging system, because things are changing. Life is changing. We are all related. There's no being without relationship. We are involved. The world is dynamic and loving. And rather than being predictable, reality, where we are, what we are, is a sea of possibility. It involves the capability and the ability to influence the world. So for Whitehead, becoming, constantly becoming, was reality, was what reality was all about. How does this relate to Christianity? Who cares, right? Since we have free will, we are affected by our past, and God is present in our lives. So incarnation, for example, is not a singular event. God is not incarnate only in Jesus, God is constantly incarnating in the world. There's not redemption, there's constant redeeming. There's not resurrection, there's constant redeeming. There's not atonement, there's constant atoning. So nothing is a closed, dogmatic system. So I wondered how Whitehead's ideas as becoming are related to the Bible, because yes, God changes God's mind in the Old Testament, but how can we say that the world, for example, is constantly incarnated with God when the Bible tells us that God was incarnate in one person? How is that biblical? Whitehead's model doesn't disagree with the Bible. It doesn't reject the creedal notion that God was incarnate, however you take that to mean, in the person of Jesus. For Whitehead, these events happened, and because they influenced people, Jesus' life and death, for example, influenced people. How is this relevant to our lives? Again, why do we care? In physics, the smallest amount of matter is a particle. In process thought, the smallest unit of reality is a moment of experience. Each moment begins with an idea, an impulse from God, and each moment of experience also includes all of the previous moments that have happened. That means all of the things that have happened in our lives, all of the things that have sort of made us who we are, which we might just call the past. Since God provides the initial idea, the impulse, and because we exist in moments, God is profoundly incarnational, both personally and in community, because God is constantly coming into each moment of our lives. Without God, process theology says that there would be no new moments. We'd simply repeat the past. So, God gives the best possibilities for the best possible outcomes in a present moment. For example, I think Janine used the example in class of God will present all of the relevant possibilities. For example, Heidi can't be in China right now because she's sitting here. That's not a relevant possibility, but a relevant possibility might be that she is sitting rather than standing on her chair. So God wants the best possible outcome in every moment and tries to provide us with all of the relevant possibilities in each moment. And again, that's not just for you and me, that's for the well-being of a family, that's for the well-being of a community, for the well-being ultimately of the world. What does this mean? This means we are never in isolation. We are always intimately related. God receives all moments into God's self and then offers the most relevant possibilities in the next moment. God's constancy is God, and God's love is for the well-being of creation. Everything in the universe is interrelated, and what we do matters. Since God is present in every moment of our experience, God is radically involved in creation. This means that we are all co-creators with God, because we decide what to do when God calls or gives us the impulse. And because we have the choice of how to integrate God's call in our lives from moment to moment, freedom, self-determination, and relationships are vital to our lives. Besides Whitehead, another figure, very briefly, in process theology is Charles Hartshorne, who was a contemporary of Whitehead. They differed on various points, but Hartshorne is known for being a panentheist. Pan-all. Panentheist essentially means that God is in everything and everything is in God.